5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX Podcast, where I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. This podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagement. It offers a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talent. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace. Simply because leaders who don't care about the employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Lee Caraher, founder and CEO of Forte PR and Digital Marketing, and the author of The Boomerang Principle, Inspiring Lifetime Loyalty from Employees. Today with Lee we talk about what is the Boomerang Principle? What is the strategic advantage of putting the Boomerang Principle to work in organizations? What's the new employer-employee loyalty paradigm? What are the 5 steps to creating a culture of return? What goes into creating an alumni club? How should employees approach leaving so they can come back? What are the 3 things managers must do to work well with millennials? And what can women do to help themselves in a male-dominated office? Support for this podcast is brought to you by Live Guides. Live Guides helps companies increase employee engagement and reduce presenteeism loss by providing a human-to-human network to help employees through their life challenges. Life Guides pairs people who are going through a specific life challenge with guides who have gone through the exact same life challenge. As Match.com pairs people for love and Doctors on Demand finds doctors for patients, Life Guides matches a guide to each employee's specific life challenge. For employers, Life Guides offers a range of customized plans which support your employee families with one-on-one support, offers empathy, experienced guidance at a highly affordable cost. Find out more at www.lifeguides.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Lee, and because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next events, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Lee Caraher. She is calling from the Bay Area in California, and she's the founder and CEO of Forte PR and Digital Marketing, and the author of The Boomerang Principle, Inspiring Lifetime Loyalty from Employees. Lee, thanks for being with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Very easy question to start. Who are you?
That's very existential. I don't know, Stefan. So I'm Lee Caraher. I'm the CEO of a company. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm a mom. I'm a friend. I'm involved in our community. And I believe that I've been put here on the planet to help really good people do great things.
That's a nice way to put it together. Why writing this book first?
Yeah, I had my first book, which was called Millennials in Management, which was really helping break the myths about the negative myths around millennials in the workplace. Mm-hmm. When I was did so much speaking on this topic, and every time I went to do a speech, someone would raise their hand and say, why should I spend any time investing my time in millennials because they're going to leave. And as soon as they leave, they're dead to me. And I'm like, no, you just can't think that way anymore. And really what we want to do as employers is to create an attachment with our employees to the company and to the people in it so that they will come back. They will come back after we know when we hire someone that they're going to leave us. I mean, that's just what happens, right? You hire someone and they're not going to stay forever. So instead of just worrying about them when they're with you, why don't we think about it as a long term? And if you're my employee, Stefan, I want you to be loyal to the company for your entire career. And I want you to come back. I want you to come back as a customer. I want you to come back as a consultant. I want you to come back as a partner. I want you to come back as an employee. And every time I talked about this, the younger group and whoever was younger in the group was like, yeah, I would totally come back to companies. I'm ready to come back. I just don't want to be, I have to go create my career. And the older people was sort of, oh, that's a new thought, because that used to be the norm. You left, you're dead to me. Yeah. But if we don't hire people back, we are shrinking, or even have the thought process of hiring people back. We are shrinking the talent pool from which we pull. And that is not very strategic in today's environment. So hence the book.
All right. What is the strategic advantage then of putting the boomerang principle to work in organizations?
The strategic advantage is that if you have an organization that people return to, you have an organization that people have a hard time leaving. And you have a positive environment that you, it only works if it's high performing, right? If you're actually doing work, right? But a high performing organization that people return to is probably a profitable, very efficient organization that's doing well in its doing well in its industry. The probability is very, very high that is true. And the more you can create an environment, create a culture that people have a hard time leaving and want to return to, the more efficiency and profit you're driving into your business. So that is a strategic advantage. It's not just everyone wants to come back, and it's not all lollipops and tulips, right? This is a business advantage because it means profit.
What's the new employer-employee loyalty paradigm, and why?
Well, it used to be, they're not loyal. They leave the company, and that means they're not loyal to me. Well, when you pay someone to show up, that is not loyalty. That is a transaction. That is an agreement. Every time you give someone a paycheck, they showed up for the previous 2 weeks. You have to show up. Showing up's not a skill. You don't have to learn how to show up. You just have to be there, right? But when you leave someone and they're not paying you, that's not loyalty. Loyalty is doing something for somebody you do not have to do. That you do it out of your curiosity, your feelings, your interest. That it's like, I'm out in the world. I've left your company, Stefan, and I'm out at a different company. And the different company says, we need a fill in the blank. I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to talk to Stefan. Now, I don't have to do that. But that's like, it would be good for your business, not bad for my business. And at least I'm connecting the world, right? So that's a loyal act. Another loyal act you can do after you've left a company is you're out there and that your former employer is looking for employees, and you meet Stefan, and Stefan would be perfect for this job at Double Forte. And you just call and say, hey, Lee, I met this guy, Stefan, and he would be perfect for this job. I really think you should interview him. Well, you don't have to do that. You're not expecting anything, but that's a loyal act. You're thinking about the betterment of the organization that you left. So if we have this imagination that loyalty should be for your life and not just for the time that we pay people, it expands your platform immensely and basically over time infinitely. And you create a stronger company with a larger platform.
What are the 5 steps to creating a culture of return then?
Mm-hmm. Well, a culture of return is a culture to stay for. So one is vision and purpose. What is your purpose what is your entity, your organization here for? And what does it stand for? Because when people can understand and then align with a purpose of an entity, you have a much higher proclivity to stay and be invested in it. 2 is being explicit around every person's role in that vision. So you might be the lowest person on the totem pole. You might be the janitor. But if you understand why you're there, then you have a role, and everyone understands that no job exists that doesn't need to get done. Mm-hmm. I mean, particularly for younger people who are in entry-level positions, they get, oh my gosh, it's so boring. This is rote work. But if you explain why that work is so important and why this work will be foundational for your career, that whole negative thought around this repetition work sort of goes away. So understanding your role in it. 3 is understanding that people are not boxes. I think particularly HR gets a really bad rap for wanting to check boxes and putting people in squares. And I don't think that's necessarily the way they think. But, if I come into a company, and particularly today's millennials and Gen Z, they already have the idea that they're going to have 5 or 6 careers in their long working life. That's not just 5 jobs. That's like moving up a ladder of responsibility. That's 5 different careers. I could be a video production person. I could be in public relations. I could be a writer. I could be a whatever, right? And if we know that and just approach our employees that way and say, what are you interested in? What do you want to get done? What are your skills that you want to develop? And then how can we help you develop them in the construct of my company? Then that is helping people, expand and build their careers within the structure of the company, which as long as people are performing, that's the longer you can keep people that are interested and engaged in learning new things, the better off it is. So understanding that your company is a living organism as well and is made up of people who have their own goals, and how can we mix those things. I'll give you an example. My assistant is an actor, and he took the job with us so that he could act at night because it was pretty specific hourly work, from a certain time to a certain time. And I turned around one day at lunch, and he's drawing a greeting card for his mother, and it was amazing. And I said, David, you're an artist. He goes, yeah, I sort of do this on the side. I'm like, on the side? That is wonderful. Would you like to do that in the company too? He goes, oh, I would love that. I never even thought that was possible. He just didn't even think to even tell us that he was an artist because he was hired for a specific job that didn't have artist in its job description. Well, yeah. He's been with us. Thought he would move from Michigan to San Francisco and be with us for 2 years. He's been with us for 4.5 years now because his job is so different from the one he got hired for. And he's very valuable to the company, right? So that's the third thing. The fourth thing is when people leave, do not ask them back. Don't counter them. Say congratulations. Say, how can I help you leave well? Say, I hope you come back, but don't try to counter them, because people who get countered, that is, if they decide to stay because they were countered with more money, then your relationship wasn't very good and you weren't doing good stuff, right? And they weren't being honest with you, or you weren't being honest with them. And you have to sort of set a new paradigm for that relationship. And then fifth is a culture of return is one that people are connected to over time. So creating an alumni club for your former employees so that you can keep them connected to the organization and to the people in the organization is critical, so that there's an easy pathway from leaving to return.
And I love the concept of alumni. I know of a company who does graduation parties every time someone leaves the company. Mm-hmm. It's not only to celebrate the individual's contribution to the company, but also to celebrate the company's contribution to the growth of the employee.
Absolutely.
Which is a very interesting concept, because oftentimes, as you said, as soon as you leave the company, you're dead to the company. Even exit interviews usually are not well conducted or even not well designed. It's mostly to say, okay, so you're leaving the company, make sure that you surrender your key and your laptop and your phone or whatever it might be, and that's it. It's not really to understand the reasons why the person is leaving. So what goes into creating an alumni club then?
So an alumni club is, the purpose of the alumni club is to keep people who have worked in your organization attached to the organization and and connected with the people who used to work for the organization. And it works for a company of 10 people, and it works for a company of 100,000 people. It scales immensely. And what goes into it, depending on the size of the company, there are many different solutions. But the first thing is, a lot about your former employees. You have their personal email, their birthdays, where they live, right? Yes. So one is making sure you're connected to. So the first thing is, welcome them as they leave. Welcome to the alumni program. Welcome to the alumni club, number one. Two, create an online network. And you can do this with proprietary software that's on the market, or you can just do it in a private Facebook group, which is what my company does because we're small. I would not do it on LinkedIn. This is not something that a rogue former employee runs. This is something that the company runs. So it's a private network that you administer. We do it in Facebook group that people are invited to, and it's private. And we post everything we post for employees that's not about HR stuff, like put in your timesheet or that kind of stuff. We also post into our alumni program, so into our alumni club. So if we have a new client, we let people know. If we have someone gets promoted, we post that in the alumni group. If someone of our employees, a former employee, gets a promotion at their new job, we post that in there too. So we're keeping people connected. And in our Facebook group of alumni, which again, we're a 17-year-old company, I think we have 50 people in there, maybe. It's not large, but people our former employees are doing work with each other through this Facebook group, which is great. And then so that's just keeping them in, so a Facebook group, you should be updating that 2 or 3 times a week kind of thing, unless you have a lot of information. If you have if you have a client, or if you're giving your employees a discount, extend the discount to your former employees. And maybe it's a smaller discount, but there's lots of ways to keep people doing that. On their birthday, send them a birthday card. It's not that expensive. And that's just the whole point, is to keep people connected to the company and make sure that they know that you appreciate that they were here with you. People spend a lot of time hiring people and not enough time having people well and keeping them connected. And it's not that hard. It really isn't that hard. The things you're doing for your current employees, you can just extend to your former employees after you get it set up.
Who owns that piece then? Companies are structured in a way where you have a recruiting or talent acquisition team, whose jobs, responsibilities are to attract and bring people in. And then you have HR is to keep people inside, and then no one really is responsible for what happens next when people leave.
No, they aren't. And this, well, of course, I run a PR firm, so I'm going to have a point of view. I look at it should be owned by someone who's enthusiastic. Yes. And it can be owned by someone in marketing, someone in PR, someone in the office of the president, but someone who is well connected in the company to know what's going on. And I don't advise it being in HR unless it's a very positive HR experience with the company, because HR, sometimes people think about HR as the enforcers, right?
Yes, the police. Yeah.
The police, and it's so unfortunate, but they just have other rules and compliance things that they have to do. But if you put it into communications or into public relations or into customer service even, And then that person who's responsible for it is well connected to HR and well connected to the office of the president and well connected to the marketing team and well connected to promotions, so they can get information and put it into the system. That is going to be the most successful thing. It'll be a cross-functional position that can sit almost anywhere, but I don't recommend it for HR just for those reasons.
What do you think of referral programs?
You mean for internal employees or external ones?
For internal employees.
Both. Yeah, I think that's great. Your employees should be out there. They should be part of an industry, part of a community, part of what's going on in the world. They have other interests. And if they know people or they know acquaintances of people who they think would do a good job at your entity, at your organization, well, they're cutting down the cost of recruiting dramatically by having someone who's already vetted somebody else. Like, oh, yeah, they would fit really well in Joe's group, So if they're doing that, the referral, the incentive referral, some people, or incentive referral should be paid only if you hire the person, right?
Yes.
So it's not the responsibility. It's not just, a rubber stamp. Oh, Lee said hire this person, just hire them. No, but they definitely come in with a leg up. And they don't have to do it. It is a loyal act. We extend it to our former employees. So our former employees, if they send to somebody, we send them a gift. As well, we don't usually send them money because of the 1099 situation, the tax situation, but we send them a gift. Thank you so much. So I highly, and we've just actually, I was just talking to a client yesterday who upped their referral fee. It's such a tight labor market with so many of our clients, and in San Francisco and New York, where we have our big offices. Oh my gosh, it's so tight. So if you can have someone cut that time for you, oh my gosh, give them something. Doesn't have to be a lot. Doesn't have to be a lot at all.
Now let's flip the coin for the next question. Mm-hmm. How should employees approach leaving so they can come back? Right.
It's your responsibility to be a boomerang eligible, right?
Yes.
Don't leave you don't leave your job in a blaze of glory, as it were, right? Your job is to leave so that you maintain the relationships and that you're boomerang eligible. Even if you might have a bad manager, like you're leaving the manager, not the company, and you just couldn't get it done. And in some big organizations, it's very hard to, move the needle there. But you're leaving, particularly in a big organization, your leaving will be in a file. And when you reapply, because more and more companies are doing this, looking to hire former employees, they will look in your file and they will see, did they leave well or not? So it's your responsibility to leave well. So how do you leave well? So we're actually in the process, as someone who has worked for my company for 7.5 years, I've been talking to him for about 18 months, and he has been with the company for 7.5 years. He originally thought he'd be with us for 3 years, so he's already more than doubled his time that he anticipated. And he's not sure he wants to do something new. He doesn't know what it is. And so first it was just talking to him about, well, if you don't know what it is, don't leave what you have. How can we make what you have more interesting to you, right? So we worked on that. But I knew that we've been talking sort of every few months for the last 1.5 years, and I knew that he wasn't going to stay forever. But I was just like, when you decide what you want to do, let me know and I will help you. But in the meantime, let's make sure that you're motivated by this job, that you're doing the job well, because it would be bad if you weren't doing the job well and we had to end it poorly. Well, he just finished 2 huge projects about 1.5 months ago. And he came to me and said, Lee, I think it's time. It's time for me to go. I'm like, and of course it's crushing because I've known this person for so long and obviously have a good relationship with him. But I'm very happy for him because he's going to figure out what's next. And he said, I don't even know how to leave a company I love. I said, well, you're doing it. He gave me 8 weeks of notice, right? So 8 weeks. And he's kept up his work. And he's made sure that all of the work has been transitioned. He's written me memos on every person who reports to him. He's written on what he recommends and what he sees at, sort of mid review cycle stuff, just so that it doesn't get lost in transition between him being the manager and someone else being a manager.
Yeah.
He's written out for every account that he's on. He's written out here are the weaknesses, here are the strengths. Don't forget this. Here's his recommendation. He's been working with me on that transition, so that by the time he leaves, he said this yesterday. He goes, "I want to leave so that you guys don't miss me." And of course, we're going to miss him, but we're not going to blame him for the hole. Right? So how can you leave without leaving a hole that people go, "Oh my God, he dropped the ball. How could he do that to us?" Right? You leave so that people are set up to win. And more than 2 weeks in general is good, because if you've been in a company for a while, you're probably doing lots of things people don't know about.
Yeah.
What's on your job description and what people's real roles are often vastly different. And it's not a surprise. Right? It's not a surprise. Him coming to me, I was disappointed. I'm always disappointed when someone says they want to go somewhere else or do something new or need to leave for their life or whatever. But the respect that he showed in how he was leaving is a perfect example of how someone leaves well. And he's absolutely welcome back. And I hope he does come back after he goes and does something new. And frankly, when he does come back, he'll be more valuable to us because he would have had another experience that he can bring to bear. And that's really your job. Your job as a person with a career is to make sure that you have the most options, that you have the most places you can possibly go. And as you leave an entity, doing it well, writing notes, getting people prepared, saying thank you, and then, joining the alumni club. And then I usually leave my former employees alone for about 6 months. And then I reach out and I say, "How you doing?" But offering to be a mentor, and then, that's leaving well. Not recruiting people behind you. That's also leaving well.
So the example that you gave requires a high level of trust to have an open conversation about someone's future and someone not knowing whether or not they're going to find a future within an organization. Because usually employees just keep it very quiet. They look for another job on the side. As soon as they have the contract signed, that's when they give their notice.
Mm-hmm. That is usual. And it's unfortunate, right? I think that the stronger organizations are going to be the ones that have open conversations about expectations around this. Every time someone starts at Double Forte, they meet with me sometime in the first 2 weeks, and I say, "I know you're going to leave." And they're look at me like, "Lee, I just got here. What are you talking about leaving for?" I said, "Well, I just want to put it on the table. I know you're going to leave. My job, my hope is that Double Forte is one of the most important places you can be in your whole career. And that if you're here for a year, if you're here for 10, that you will never take it off your resume. That you will feel proud of having been at Double Forte, and that we would have helped you as you have helped us do the work." And what I know, though, as you come in, particularly if you're younger, if you're 22 to 30, oh my goodness, how does a 22-year-old know what they want to do for the rest of their life? I know you're going to have lots of other interests, and I know you might want to do something else, but please, and I just say, please let us know what you're interested in. Please let us know, if you want to leave, if we can help you. We have some people who have been at the company that's their only job. One person in particular has been in this job at this company for 8 years, right out of college. But her resume looks very, very, I keep saying, "Oh my gosh, she's going to leave," because she's been here for 8 years. But then we have a conversation with her and she said, "Well, I want to do this. I want to learn that." And so her resume looks very different than just being in the same company for 8 years, right? It looks lots of movement and growth and different kind of responsibilities. But we know this of people. They want different things. They want to keep learning. So some people don't believe me. But probably half do, and half come talk to me about it, or have talked to their managers about it. And it is a new paradigm, so you just have to live it. You have to live it, and if people don't only give you 2 weeks, we haven't actually had anyone only give us 2 weeks. Well, no, that's not true. We had someone who came this year. She was with us for 8 weeks, and then she got offered the dream job, the job that she had hoped to get. We were her second choice. And the dream job came open, and she took that dream job and she gave us 2 weeks. Well, I actually didn't want her to stay too much longer because she wasn't really that entrenched, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But people who've been with us over a year, I don't think anyone's ever left with 2 weeks that I can think of.
That's pretty impressive. And let's talk about those darn millennials. Everybody complains about the millennials, the scapegoat for everything that is going wrong in the world today. Mm-hmm. What are the 3 things managers must do to work well with those darn millennials?
Well, I think I'm going to say 4 things. So the first thing is realize, this phenomena of blaming the younger generation is not new, right? I have a degree in medieval history, which is 1,000 years of intergenerational conflict, yes. Right? So, people were complaining about our generation when we came in the workplace too. So that's 1. Two is millennials and Gen Z right behind them. They do have very different upbringings and very different opportunities than Gen X and Boomers and Silents ahead of them. So recognize they've had a different upbringing and they've had different experiences, and so they have different expectations. And I think the piece that people miss is setting really good expectations from the beginning. Don't assume anything. Don't assume anybody knows what your hours are. Don't assume anyone knows what your professional work, wardrobe at work is. Don't presume anybody understands how long things should take. Don't assume anything. And then really just set the expectation. Here's what we're here for. Here's the role. Here's where this might take you. Lots of different options. Here's what you need to learn. Here's how it works here. So just be really clear about expectations. That's number 1. Number 2 is be ready to listen. And I always say to both sides of this equation, when you start a new company, a new job, no matter how old you are, you look at things and go, I have some ideas on how you can improve this. And people who are older shut up about it. And millennials and Gen Z are like, hey, I know how we can improve this. And it's like their second hour on the job, right? And I say to our new employees, you're going to have lots of new ideas about how we can improve. And we want to hear them, but we want to hear them after about a month, right? We don't want you to hear, we're going to set it up so that after a month, we're going to have a meeting and say, what do you see that we can improve? Because if you show up your first day and say, I know how we can improve this process, well, that just is disrespectful to, there's no possible way you can know that because you haven't been in the organization, you don't know the dependencies, et cetera, et cetera. So I always ask people, so do it our way once or twice, and then let's talk about it. I want to hear your ideas for improvement. Because often, no matter how old you are, your initial idea for improvement, once you understand the process and the dependencies and what has to happen, the end result, your opinion will change over time on how to improve. At the same time, lots of new ideas, right? We have people we use Outlook. We're an Outlook shop, but we have employees who've never worked in Outlook, who have never used, the commands that Outlook has. They're only in the Google Cloud, who have never printed out a document. And, working with 55-year-olds who are like, okay, we're using Outlook, and when you give me a draft, I need it to be on a piece of paper, not a Google link, right? So just being really specific about these things. And then asking after some time, how can we improve this? How can we make it better? And being open to it. And I think the third thing is to give very specific feedback very well. And this is the hardest piece. How do you give feedback, and constructive feedback, corrective feedback in a way that can be heard by a younger person who doesn't want to hear, you don't want to be patronizing. They don't want to be patronized. And how can you learn how to give feedback in a way that is direct and current, timely? And just don't wait, don't wait at all. And that's probably the biggest mistake that boomers make, Gen Xers make with their younger employees, is they wait to give feedback and they let their younger employees be wrong for a long time. And they wait for cycles instead of being, we need you to, our hours, are 8:30 to 5:30, and we need you to tell us if you're going to be late. Not let someone wait for their first 90-day review and say, well, you haven't come in on time for 90 days. Why don't you let me be wrong? What do you mean? How embarrassing, right? So don't let people be wrong for long.
What can women do to help themselves in male-dominated offices? Being a female CEO yourself, and I'm sure interacting with other female CEOs, do you have any recommendations, any tips?
Oh, Stefan, this could be another 4-hour conversation. Well, we do, public relations as an industry is very female-dominated, but but our clients are mostly men in general. And so it is a dynamic that happens often. And I think the Me Too movement and sort of being aware of things that unconscious bias, bringing them to bear is something that we need to do for our organizations and for the colleagues that we have. I take the point of view that most people don't understand that they're being offensive. Most people don't understand that they are being biased. And I think one is to confront it. And depending on your role and depending on what level you're at and all that kind of stuff, those people who have have more experience and have higher titles obviously have much more weight in this thing. But if you see that the women aren't being paid attention to, one, help amplify the other women in the room. So this is common that, in fact, in the Obama administration and the first administration, Mr. Obama had many women on his staff, but they felt they were being heard. So in his second administration, the women got together and figured out, okay, how come we're not being heard? And then they decided they weren't going to sit next to each other anymore. And so they sat across the table from each other. So basically, if you're 3 women within a 10-person team, don't sit next to each other. Sit across from each other so that when people are talking, they don't just look past the women, all 3 at a time, right? They have to actually turn their head to hear somebody. The second is to amplify each other. If it's a good idea, and so if I have a good idea and the other people in the room aren't listening to it, and then Jane says, Lee had a good idea, then Jane has interrupted the conversation. She has reinforced my point of view, and she's also amplified her own. And then Jane can say, so Joe, what do you think about Lee's idea? Right? Because men have a very different, women, in general, there's a lot of data on this. We say something, we're like, okay, we're done. We don't have to respond. And men in general amplify each other as they go along. So if we can take that habit that is more male than female to amplify each other, that helps dramatically in changing the dynamic. And if you are at risk, if you feel that you are at risk, either bodily at risk, then leave the room and go to HR. Because it's just you can't wait. There's no waiting. The longer you wait, the less you're believed. And it's unfortunate but true. So if you feel at risk, then get yourself out of that room and go to HR meeting.
What do you make of the soccer U.S. women national team suing their own federation for equal pay?
Awesome.
It's an interesting take, too, because they're way more performant. They perform way better than the men's team.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
It's not just about the pay. So they have a very different game. So I actually have sort of dug into this topic. One, the women's team did such an amazing job this year. And I would just say the women's football World Cup was so watched all over the world. Mm-hmm. All over the world, people were tuning into women playing. We would call it soccer here, right? And it was amazing. And in Britain, everywhere, right? Blew the numbers out of the water. No one expected that much viewership from every place in the world. So it's an amazing, amazing thing. And it just is so inspiring. It's a very different game for the women in this country and the women, for the women in this country in the United States. The women's game and the men's game are very different. They're compensated differently. There's a guaranteed pay for the women. There's not guaranteed pay for the men. But the incentive pay for the men is so off the scale from what the women who outperform the men and always have, right, on the world scale, is just, it's totally inequitable. At the same time, the investment, so Megan Rapinoe, who is, one of the co-captains, has been very vocal on this, and she's really the spokesperson for the team on this topic. So there's the investment in women's sports and women's soccer is so less. It's a rounding error to the investment that the U.S. Soccer Federation makes into the men's game, but it's literally a rounding error. Meanwhile, the women are in a growing sport, competing at the international level, and it's so much more competitive today than it was. Even,
even 4 years ago.
Oh my gosh! Look at what happened this year, right? And they still don't invest. And what the investment means is, what are the facilities? What are the training? What's the pipelining? What's the nutrition? What are the sports medicine? What are all the things that you put around these athletes so that they can perform and represent your country? So it's not an apples to oranges. It seems like it should be, but because of how the games are structured, it's not apples to oranges. It is apples to apples. It's not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges because of the professional, and it's based on how the professional world works, right? So the men have many more professional opportunities than the women. Although the women's leagues are getting off the ground everywhere, but they don't make nearly as much as a male star. So I think that the women. The U.S. national women's soccer team did this is fantastic. It gets the conversation going, and I think that particularly in this country, we had Title IX. I don't know if you're familiar with Title IX, but Title IX in the United States basically guaranteed that girls and boys would have the same opportunity for sports in the education system. And it just takes a long time. It takes generations to change that, right? And soccer is the great equalizer because everyone can play.
Yeah, and it's a great PR statement as well. It's a huge platform to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I think, Serena Williams was asked, I think a week ago, so she came in second at Wimbledon. And she was asked in her press conference afterwards, and so the women's soccer team was very focused on, male soccer team, U.S. male soccer, U.S. women's soccer. Serena Williams, who obviously is one of the greatest athletes on the planet, is very focused on women and also race. In athletics and in community and in the world in general. And she was asked, someone said that you should stop worrying about equality and just be an athlete. And Serena Williams said, the day I stop worrying about talking about equality is the day I'm in my grave. And what is I find so inspiring by both the women's soccer team and people like Serena Williams is that they are using their greatness in their sport to advance social issue that impacts everything. It impacts everything because half the world is women. Half the world is women. More than half the world is not white. So, doing these things on the national in such a huge way that people can see, this advances the conversation. And I think the more we have the conversation, the better off we all are. I have an opinion about that, Stefan. What do you think?
No, I love it. That's why I asked the question too, because I knew that you would have quite an extensive answer to it. Let me ask you some fun questions before we end our conversation today. If you were to invite a historical figure to dinner, who would you pick and why?
So many people. I would pick so many people. I would pick, oh my God.
Now you've got to pick a woman. After what you just said, you can't pick a man.
I said I have to choose a woman, right? I would choose Rosa Parks, and I would want to talk to her about what gave her the power to actually sit down and not move.
Yeah, very powerful. Mm-hmm. What was your biggest screw up at work, and what did you learn from it?
Okay. I've had so many screw ups at work.
That's a good thing.
Oh my gosh. And they are gifts, right? If you're a confident person, and make sure that you learn from them and not repeat them there, but they still make me cringe. I think one of my biggest screw ups at work was when I was working for Sega, the video game company. And we were at a presentation. I was with my CEO who was giving a presentation, and I didn't stay. This was before technology is where it is today, but I didn't stay next to the computer while we were preparing for him to go on, and someone disconnected it. So the presentation didn't go. Even saying it out loud makes my stomach go to my feet. So what did I learn? I said, don't count on anybody else. Make sure you plug it in, you make sure it works, and then you stay there until it works.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to be a radio personality.
You'd be good at it. Very good.
Well, thank you.
What type of radio personality?
Well, like myself, but someone who's talking to interesting people and talking about what we just talked about. Let's do things the right way. Let's do things that empower people. Let's not just do things because that's the way it was.
What sound or noise do you love?
Sound or noise do I love?
Yes.
My son is a musician, and I love hearing him play.
Which one do you hate?
Fingernails on a chalkboard.
Yes.
Or styrofoam when it rubs together.
Oh boy. Yeah. I have goosebumps right now.
Exactly, right?
What's the essential item you always take with you when you go on vacation?
I take about 10 books. I just read. I read a lot.
Paper. What type of books?
All types of books. In fact, I'm about to go on vacation, so I'll tell you. Right next to me, I have Seth Godin's new book, This is Marketing. I'm halfway through The National Team, the inside story of the women who changed soccer, since you talked about that. I have Fight Like a Mother, which is about Shannon Watts and her efforts to get sensible gun laws in this country. I have SPQR, a history of ancient Rome. So I got lots of kinds of books.
A very good list. What is your favorite word?
Awesome.
And your least favorite word?
Hate.
What is the way for our listeners to follow you on social media?
So I'm really easy to find. So my website is leecaraher.com, LeeCaraher.com. I'm on Twitter at Lee Caraher. I'm on Instagram, Lee Caraher, and on Facebook, I'm Lee Caraher1.
All right, and we'll share all this information in the podcast notes too. Any last word of advice or wisdom?
Advice or wisdom? I would say that if you're unhappy in your work, find a way to get happy or find a new work.
I love
Life's too short.
Life's too short. Well, thank you, Lee. It's been a lot of fun having you on the show.
Stefan, thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.